Okay, what is a venture studio? So I've spoken in a little bit about what Applico does, but basically what we're seeing is we're seeing a huge swath of opportunity to build startups. Historically, startups have been built by a team of entrepreneurs. They start a company and they raise money from VCs, and hopefully they have a big exit, either going public or getting acquired. What venture studios are doing are saying, I'm going to bring together a group of founders and different people with different skill sets to form an initial team to give them a direction and a thesis around a new startup opportunity. I'm going to give them the resources to go execute upon that, whether it's the human resources, whether it's capital, whether it's maybe some IP around technology or data or other kind of value-added service. And I'm going to now help launch this business and set this new business on its way. Basically, for the founders and the team that's starting this new business, the risk-reward scenario for those individuals is not as aggressive as it would be if you were just an entrepreneur with a couple buddies starting a business from scratch, right? Where the risk-reward scenario is ultra extreme, right? Huge amount of risk, huge amount of reward, 99 point whatever % chance of failure. In this model, it's saying, I'm going to pay you a much better cash compensation. You are going to have some equity upside in the business if it's successful, but it's not going to be as meaningful as if you were to just start a business from scratch and completely be on your own and have to get all your funding on your own. And I'm helping to solve a lot of these problems and help you get a better balance for these kinds of different variables to start this new business. Okay. So you've seen venture studios for probably 10 years now. There's kind of two buckets of venture studios. Historically, the venture studios that we've seen for 10 years, Garrett Camp, one of the co-founders of Uber, launched a venture studio called Expa. And that was kind of the traditional version of the venture studio, where what you're like a startup incubator. You're launching these businesses off into the wild, pretty much explicitly as I just described it, right? You give money, you give resources, you give maybe some IP, you give a direction, strategic direction, and then you let that team go and hopefully thrive. Now, what you've seen in the past few years is you've seen the venture studio model shift towards working with enterprises. And I think that over the next 20 years, you're going to see a huge amount of opportunity saying, hey, if I can tap into this value, it could be customers that you don't treat very well or you don't effectively serve today. It could be suppliers that you have access to. It could be your initial inventory. It could be data about what people are buying and what their interests are. It could be different value-added services, your brand and trust that you have with your different users already in the ecosystem, just your knowledge about the industry, if it's a regulatory environment or whatever it may be. And you say, hey, if I was to go take the traditional venture studio model and partner up with a large enterprise that has all of these untapped assets, would I help bring a much higher chance of success to the traditional venture studio model? And the answer is yes, you would. Now, the hard part is how do you actually tap into these assets in a large enterprise, right? Because they have them. It's a whole other thing to be able to A, identify them, B, tap into them, and then C, actually execute, pull it all together, and build a new startup business from scratch. Kind of a tough thing to pull off. So, but you're starting to see venture studios building startups with corporations more and more these days. You're starting to see some venture studios take different approaches to doing this. But I think the key model for success is to say, how do you have the right stakeholders at the traditional enterprise involved to tap into those untapped resources and assets? Because that's the key thing. If you're able to work in collaboration with the traditional enterprise and they're excited about an opportunity in their industry, they would love to own or be a large LP in a new startup in their space, much more so than just say being a minority shareholder, right? Then that can make a lot of sense. The problem is tapping into those resources, right? The large enterprise might be able to cut you a check. The large enterprise might be able to help seed some of the capital to get this business going. But to tap into those resources from the traditional enterprise, that's very difficult because these traditional enterprises are busy and they have process and they have a certain way of doing things. And if you want to actually then get other people in a large enterprise to work with you, they have a full-time job. They're compensated not to help you out. They're compensated to make what they're working on successful. And they have KPIs against that. They have team members against that. They have a lot of different people that depend upon them. And believe it or not, they're actually very busy delivering on that. So how do you affect change internally at a large traditional enterprise to get access to all of these things that if you could get access to them, you could be wildly successful building this new startup over here outside of the core enterprise, and have a much higher chance of success than if you were just to go build this startup from scratch on your own, either in a traditional venture studio model, or just as a bunch of founders doing their own thing and trying to figure it out as they go. Now, unfortunately, what you have seen happen and what you will continue to see happen is that these kind of corporate venture studios get the short end of the stick, where the traditional enterprise promises that you can get access to all of these things, but then you never get access to them. And by the way, when you work with a large enterprise, and if they do contribute money into something like this, you can bet that there's going to be more strings attached than if you were to go to maybe a more traditional VC, venture funding path. So that money comes with strings, and you better recognize that. The hope is that it comes with strings, but there's a lot more value than there is either process or different stakeholders that you need to liaison with, you need to work with, since they are part of this new venture, right? Finding that balance is really tough. And it's something that myself and the team here at Applico has been working on for about 4 or 5 years. We've had some very strong successes. We've had some failures that we've been able to learn a lot from. But that said, if you can get over that hump, there's huge value. And I think that'll be the next 20 years of seeing such a wide swath of untapped value in traditional enterprises. And if you can access it, if you can tap into it, then you'll absolutely see the benefit and the reward in terms of your hit rate of building successful startups. Hi, this is Alex from Winner Take All. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the content. Feel free to leave a comment, ask us questions, and definitely make sure to join us on our next live stream.